Hi everyone. As we know, microservices have become a norm today. Everyone is building services and it's no longer a buzzword. But still, many developers don't follow best practices. They miss out on small but important nuances. And that's where I think we should take the example of big companies and check out their take on this topic.
Sounds interesting, Havish, and I completely agree. It will be great to learn from the industry expert and also, with your own product building experience, right? So, which company's architecture do you think we can discuss today, Bhavesh?
So today, we'll be discussing how Medium adopted microservices architecture.
Okay.
Okay. Now here, the chief architect of Medium, Xiao, has beautifully and very concisely explained what microservices are. There has to be a single purpose for every service. Services should be loosely coupled, and there has to be high cohesion between them. Now, let's understand these things through this image.
Okay.
Let's say if our architecture doesn't have this high cohesion, which means for every feature, the business logic or data is present in more than one service. Imagine this, you have a payment service and an order service. Now, if a user adds or removes items from the cart, we need not invoke payment service code again and again. Now, if our service don't have this single purpose, which means a lot of code is written in one service and that service is doing multiple things, which means that it is now a big app which is serving many requests, which is exactly like a monolith. So if we have this condition in our architecture, we will end up with multiple monoliths. Now these apps needs to be further broken down to a level that each service serves a single purpose. Notice the difference between multiple monoliths and distributed monoliths here. Finally, if our services are not loosely coupled, it means that all the services are dependent on each other to serve a request, and a failure in any one of them could lead many APIs to fail, and the system will become too fragile. So, Sahil, what do you think that a team of developers should avoid while starting to build distributed systems?
I think Bhavesh, you surface very key important pillars of microservices, right? I think one, you touch base on loose coupling.
Yeah.
Microservices should be like single purpose and having high cohesion, right? But importantly, we should not, or at least from my understanding, important, we should not have microservices just for the sake of it, right?
Yeah, yeah,
Agreed, these pillars to be there, but it doesn't mean that we want our services to be segregated just on the basis of maybe line of code, right? Or neither we would want that decoupling or segregation happening on I want to try some sort of a new stack, right? And
correct,
also,
correct.
I mean, I will not, or a strict no over here that just because there's a tendency we want to start something from scratch, we will tend to start microservices. So yeah, I
Correct,
think
correct.
those things we should definitely try to avoid and stick to some of these pillars which you just told about. Yeah. So Bhavesh, we will discuss this principle behind opting for the framework and these principles that we spoke about, right? But do you think there are certain downsides or reasons that we should not be going for microservices or sticking to monolith architecture altogether?
Yes, I'll. So moving to microservices is also an important decision because there is an upfront investment. Setting
Okay.
up CI/CD pipelines might take a couple of weeks. There will be big learning curve for existing developers. Now, at this point of time, an organization can take a step back and check if they can improve the efficiency of their existing monolith so that they can run it without any much dev effort for next 6 to 9 months. That can give them ample amount of time to invest in the preparations for a distributed system. Now, let's say we have decided to go with microservices. We have understood these three design principles and we are starting to finally build. Now, Jaima has laid down 7 strategies which comes handy. First, a new microservice should have clear values, which means it should have a product or an engineering goal. For example, it should reduce computational overhead on the monolith or make the important user flows a lot more smoother or any significant improvement either engineering wise or product wise.
So, Bhavesh, agreed on your first principle, right, with Xiaoma is speaking about. But A lot of times I've seen, like, working in the industry, right, for the last 3 to 4 years, engineers have been coming to me asking the same question, like, almost n number of times. I'm hearing these things, right? That how do you decide that, hey, we want a new service, or basically, how will you segregate these services, right? Or, do you
Yeah.
have certain number in mind that, hey, my tech stack initial first 12 months will be like, 10 services, or what will be those services? So is there a rationale behind that?
Yes, I. So this decision has to be taken very carefully, else it can lead to having a huge tech debt. I'll take an example for my current organization. Here we deal with hospitals and radiologists. Hospital sends us cases, we route the case to the best available radiologist, and radiologists generate the report for this. So, as you might have noticed, I took a few important terms here: cases, reports, and routing. So initially, when I started building services here, we started with 5 basic services: one for auth, one for cases, which is like an order, one payment service, a report service, which takes care of PDF generations and all, and a routing service. Now, these decisions have to come from what business your organization is into. It's as simple as that.
Interesting. So basically, something on the sorts of what is coming from the business, and your tech following that. Is that right?
Correct, correct, correct. Sahil, as you always lay stress on the topic of data consistency among microservices, what strategies do you think should be adopted in early stages to ensure this?
I think what I have realized, right, moving to microservice data consistency is, like, one of the most important pillars of, like, solving or having the right architecture while choosing for microservices, right? Now, coming to, like, the article, and, like, how Xiao is also sharing his thoughts, right? That we need not have one persistent storage which is, like, shared across all the services. It will violate a lot of principles of microservices, right? So
Correct.
on the other side, what we want is basically the database should be distributed, right? Services should request the data via an API, or a read-only copy of data that can be saved via some sort of a asynchronous messages, maybe, right? So, like, I'm not going very much deep. I think data consistency is a very big topic in itself, and
Yep.
definitely, we will have to have, like, a separate video to cover all the nuances which are there in data consistency, right? Now,
Correct. Correct.
let's just move on to another interesting topic, right? So, Pavish, like, I agree to, whatever the points that you were mentioning, right? So, but I have one query, right? So, how about infrastructure, right? Moving or splitting into multiple services, right? Don't you think it will increase burden on the DevOps? Basically, like, I will require engineers to be skilled enough to have, like, better deployment strategies and managing a lot of services, right? And also, what about the cost, right? Because a lot of time business is worried that, my cost will spill over. So, what's your take on that?
This would have been a big problem if tools like Docker Compose, AWS ECS, or Kubernetes would not have been there.
Okay.
Now, all of them help in orchestrating these containers. The most famous one is Kubernetes. But I agree to your point that there will be an initial learning curve. There will be a cost to shift the infrastructure as well. But once developers get a hang of these tools in a longer run, it is going to be beneficial. Now, at my current organization, we use Kubernetes for dev, staging, and production. So our prod environment is exactly same as our local, which eradicates the most famous issue which developers come up with, that their code is working on their local but not on production. We'll create another video on this setup as well. Furthermore, on service discovery and inter-service communication, there are many tools like Istio which can easily be configured with Kubernetes, and teams can adopt them really quickly. Now, Sahil, I think we are missing a very important point in microservices here.
Oh, I think, is it observability?
Yes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
one of my favorite topic, observability. Yeah. So coming to
Yes.
observability, I think it's very important to have right instrumentation, right, in place
Yeah.
whenever we want to serve, millions requests, billion requests, having in a day, right? So, but before that, right, what is observability? And I think in the article, it's very rightly mentioned, right? So observability is basically how your system is working, or if it is not working, what are the right insights to understand why it is not working, right? So why is also very important, right? So
Yeah.
but typically observability includes your, logging, tracing back to your original request, your health metrics, system health, performance tracking. So all those
Yeah.
things as a a unison, where we can say that those things are part of observability as a generic terminology. And
Hmm.
one thing very when coming to microservices, right? We need to be very cautious when we are going for the observability, because with all these number of services, right, we can end up not having better observability, because there could be a chances that individual teams reinventing the wheel,
Yeah.
solving the similar problems of the observability. But rather, I think with 2021 there are a lot of good open source tools and framework across or helping you out with the observability. We have Zipkin, Giga for tracing, Logly for logging, Grafana, Datadog for visualization. So I think most of these can be injected more at a platform level, and also coupled with your DevOps pipeline to solve a lot of things around the observability. I think, yeah, with that, I will say that yes, these are some key metrics that we discussed, and just to conclude on this, the points that we discussed today, right? And I hope that all of us, you got a gist with this particular article on what microservices are, what they are not, and what are the things that you should keep in mind while deciding microservices, and the 7 strategies as we rightly mentioned, or also told by Xiao, which is being followed at the medium, right? So I think, having said that, we have not even touched the tip of the glacier yet.
Yeah. Yes.
We have to go deep into some of the topics discussed in our next videos, and hope to see you soon.